The atmosphere in the square is absolutely electric. People have come in their tens of thousands. There is quite literally standing room only. There's a real sense here that history will be made tonight. But right now, they're already celebrating a victory, which as yet they're still anticipating.
Well, I'm just squeezed, squashed. There isn't a spare place in this massive square right now. The atmosphere here, well, you could describe it like, think of a carnival, which might be premature. There's a feverish anticipation here about what Mubarak is going to say.
By 10:30, when Mubarak, running late as ever, finally takes to the stage, a rare silence descends over Tahrir Square.
You could hear a pin drop once President Mubarak started his speech. Complete silence engulfed the square.
The citizens, the children of Egypt, men and women, I address you today, to the youth of Egypt, stationed in Tahrir Square. I have been a youth just like you.
Mubarak's rambling speech went on for 17 minutes. The longer he spoke, the clearer it became that the gap between president and people was unbridgeable.
I went to war. I won victories.
Suddenly a change in the crowd from attentive silence to deafening roars of "Go! Go!"
They are playing with us. They are not dealing with us as an honest government.
Standing here for like 16 days, we just had enough.
Liberation Square erupted in anger and frustration. You thought maybe that people would be demoralized, that people would be deflated, but in reality, it was the complete opposite. People had become much angrier. People had become even more determined.
We started to see the mood turn to anger, raising the anticipation and raising expectations like he did was very, very dangerous because those expectations were not met, and all you were left with were thousands, tens of thousands of very angry people.
You could see how the mood just completely altered. People were almost certain they knew what was the next line because that's what they heard him repeat all throughout his speeches since the protest began on January 25th. You could also see tears in some of the people's eyes, screams of anger, people just breaking down in tears, breaking down, screaming and saying, we cannot believe that.
Immediately afterwards, we started hearing calls for the protesters to make sure that Friday, the following Friday, they get 20 million people to the streets across the country because it became very personal on so many levels for them. They felt that this was a president who was insulting them, belittling them. His speech was seen very patronizing. Again, that was the tone that this regime fails to understand.
It's puzzling me, really, and at the same time, how it's going to react. I mean, this is very puzzling situation. It's not just fluid, now it's volcanic.
Vice President Suleiman follows on Mubarak's heels.
I call on the youth of Egypt, the youth and the heroes of Egypt. Go back home. Go back to your work. The country needs your hands. Let's join hands to build, develop in creativity.
His words have the opposite effect, incensing the crowd, pushing them onto the streets. This is the decisive moment that young activists galvanize the crowd to move on state television and other hated symbols of the regime.
And people are now in front of the Egyptian TV and radio headquarters. Many people are here, and there are many army tanks and officers and soldiers everywhere. And people are very angry and upset. And tomorrow there are supposed to be many demonstrations all over Cairo and different cities like Suez, Port Said, and Alexandria.
They've gone onto the streets of Alexandria and are heading towards, I'm told, the military base.
I think the protesters on that Friday morning, after that late-night statement by the president, felt cheated. They felt like he had sent messages that he could be stepping down through various means, and then he tricked the people, and that made them angry. And there was definitely a sense in that square when I was there very early in the morning, on that Friday morning, that something has to be done, that he cannot continue to rule this country, and that he cannot continue to be under this illusion that the protesters would leave. It was definitely a different feeling inside that square on Friday morning.
The size of the turnout today will show just how much pressure there is on Mubarak.
The military making a statement through state television saying that the military will guarantee an end to the emergency law once the existing conditions are over. There was no time frame given and no specific detail as to when, how, or under what contexts they will remove the emergency law. But again, very general statements, very imprecise and unspecific statements, and certainly no reference at all to President Mubarak. This after he, on Thursday night, disappointed the entire crowd there by appearing on television and saying that he will not resign.
Well, the numbers are starting to gradually increase out here. It started out early in the morning with roughly a couple of hundred people gathered outside the palace. There are now up to perhaps 1,000 people here. More numbers are expected, that there seems to be a crowd marching now from Tahrir onto the palace.
Another mass of protesters heading towards Tahrir Square.
It seems to be a kind of new front line, if you like. Friday prayers have ended and thousands of people coming through towards the television station and radio station building.
There's a lot of armory there. This is a potent symbol of this regime. It's its communication center, and so therefore there's probably unease in the military about what's going on there.
As every minute goes by, thousands of pro-democracy protesters are joining a crowd that is easily in the hundreds of thousands.
Unlike the day before on Thursday, where the statements that were coming out of the government were very much hyped and anticipated, Friday's events seemed very, very subtle and actually very rapid in terms of the development. We knew that by Friday morning, dozens, if not hundreds of protesters had moved towards the state and television building. Hundreds more had gone towards the presidential palace. So we knew that the Liberation Square protesters had slightly taken to the streets in a different manner. And by Friday afternoon, we were told that there was going to be a statement by the office of the president.
We think it's going to happen right now. We're watching state television here now, who are running their titles.
We were actually filming in the square because there were hundreds of people who were there praying.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, most merciful. My fellow citizens, at these hard circumstances our country is experiencing, President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak has decided to waive the office of the President of the Republic and instructed the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces to run the affairs of the country. May God guide our steps.